The observation deck of the starship was a quiet place. It was made for watching the stars. But today, the man standing there was not watching the stars. He was watching a world die. His name was Sue, and he was the captain. The world on the big screen was called Kalis Prime. It was a beautiful planet of blue oceans and green lands. Or it had been. Now ugly gray patches spread across its surface like a sickness. The gray parts pulsed with a slow, ugly light. A woman walked onto the deck to stand beside him. Her name was Hannah. She was the head doctor on the ship. She looked very tired. Her face was sad. The last signal from the surface has gone quiet, Hannah said. Her voice was flat. The Kalan people are gone. The blight took them all. It took only 7 of their cycles. Captain Sue did not turn. He just kept watching the gray planet turn. He had seen this before. Too many times. The blight was a sickness that swept across the stars. It had conquered 1,000 worlds. No one knew how to stop it. It was not a germ or a virus like you would think of. It was something else. It was a hungry thing that ate life itself. It would land on a world and change the plants and the animals. It would turn everything into more of itself. A world of gray, pulsing goo. It always wins, Sue said, more to himself than to Hannah. Hannah nodded slowly. It learns. It finds what makes a living thing work and it takes it apart. It uses the pieces to build more blight. We have no defense. Our biology is its food. They stood in silence for a long time. The only sound was the low hum of the ship. It was a sound of life, which made the dead world on the screen seem even more terrible. Then a soft beep came from the control panel. A new light started to flash. It was a communication alert. Sue turned, his brow furrowed. What is it? We are in a quarantine zone. No one should be here. A young officer at the controls looked up. It's a ship, Captain. A small one. Its design is not in our records. He looked confused. The identification tag says it is from a world called Earth. Sue and Hannah looked at each other. The name meant nothing to them. It was not part of the Galactic Commons, the great group of starfaring peoples. Put it on the main screen, Sue ordered. The image of the dying world of Kalis Prime vanished. In its place was a small, bulky-looking spaceship. It was not sleek and graceful like their own ship. It looked functional and strong like a rock. Its hull was a dull gray with small lights blinking along its side. A voice came through the speakers. It was a clear voice, speaking a language the ship's computer quickly translated. Galactic Vanguard Ship. This is the UNSS Endurance from Earth. We received your general distress call about a galactic pathogen. We are here to offer assistance. Sue almost laughed, but it was not a happy sound. It was a sound of deep weariness. Assistance? They have no idea what they are walking into. He pressed a button to reply. UNSS Endurance, this is Captain Sue of the Vanguard ship Daedalus. You have entered a Class 12 biohazard quarantine zone. Your presence is a severe risk. The threat here is beyond your understanding. There was a short pause. Then a new voice came, a woman's voice. It was calm and focused. Captain, my name is Min. I am a xenobiologist. We understand the risks. We have our own protocols. We request permission to dock and speak with you. Hannah stepped closer. Captain, we cannot allow this. If they have not been exposed, we must send them away. It is the only mercy we can offer. Sue thought for a moment. He looked at the blunt, simple ship on the screen. He thought about the hope in that woman's voice. A hope he had not felt in a long, long time. It felt like a memory from another life. Mercy, he said softly. Maybe they do not want our mercy. He opened the channel again. UNSS Endurance, your request is granted, but you will follow our decontamination procedures exactly. Any deviation and I will have you sealed in your bay. Do you understand? We understand, Captain, Min's voice replied. We are ready and thank you. A short while later, in the main meeting room of the Daedalus, the two crews met. The crew of the Daedalus looked advanced. Their clothes were smooth and shimmered slightly. They looked tired and thin, their faces marked by the loss of many worlds. The two humans who entered looked different. They wore simple dark blue uniforms. The woman Min had sharp, intelligent eyes that took in everything in the room very quickly. She was not tall, but she stood with a solid confidence. The man with her Jinn was a medical officer. He had a calm face and a quiet way of moving. They both looked very healthy. It was a stark contrast to the weary crew of the Daedalus. I am Captain Sue. This is Hannah, our head of xenomedicine, Sue said, not offering a hand. Physical contact was discouraged now. You should not have come. Min gave a small, polite nod. We heard your call. Our world believes in helping when we can. Hana could not hide her frustration. Helping? You cannot help. This is the blight. It has consumed civilizations far older and more advanced than yours. It does not care about your belief in helping. Jin spoke for the first time, his voice as calm as his posture. Can you tell us what it is? How it works? Hana gestured, and a complex hologram appeared in the middle of the room. It showed a magnified view of the blight. It looked like a shifting, silvery gray liquid, constantly changing its shape. It is a self-replicating nanoscale deconstructor, Hana explained. It enters an ecosystem and identifies the foundational protein sequences of all life. In our space, that is the GC1 sequence. It is the same for every species in the galactic commons. The blight is a key and the GC1 sequence is the lock. It unlocks the living cell and tells it to stop being what it is and start becoming more blight. The hologram showed the process. A blight particle touched a plant cell. The cell shivered, then quickly dissolved into a gray goo that joined the blight mass. It rewrites the genetic code, Min said, watching closely. It's a programmer. It is the best programmer in the universe, Sue said darkly. And it always writes the same program, death. It doesn't just attack, Jin observed, pointing at the hologram. It seems to communicate. The cells it takes over seem to send signals to other blight particles. Hana nodded, impressed despite herself. You see it correctly. It is a hive mind. It learns from every world it consumes, it adapts. If you try a chemical weapon, it learns to resist it by the second exposure. If you try radiation, it finds a way to shield itself. It is perfect. Min looked from the hologram to Hana's sad eyes and then to Captain Sue's grim face. She saw the absolute certainty of their defeat. They had given up. To them, the blight was a force of nature like a hurricane. You could not fight it. You could only run and hope it did not find you. But Min did not see it that way. She saw a problem. A terrible galaxy-sized problem, but still a problem. And every problem has a weakness, Captain Sue, Min said, her voice firm. You said the blight targets one specific protein sequence? The GC1. Yes, Hana confirmed. It is the common thread that binds all life in our community of worlds. It is our greatest strength and it became our greatest weakness. A slow smile touched Min's lips. It was not a smile of joy. It was the smile of a scientist who has just found a very interesting clue. Captain, Min said, turning to Sue, we have a theory. But to test it, we need a sample, a live sample of the blight. The room went completely silent. The Daedalus crew members looked at Min as if she had just asked for a live star to hold in her hand. Hana was the first to find her voice. You are insane, she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. That is a Class 12 biohazard. We keep samples locked in the most secure vaults and only to study how it moves. To give you a live sample is to give your world a death sentence. Our ship, the Endurance, has a secure laboratory, Jin said, his calmness unshaken. It is built to contain the most dangerous pathogens known on Earth. We are prepared for this. You are prepared for your world's dangers. Hana shot back, her voice rising. This is different. This is the blight. If it gets loose on your ship, it will not just kill you. It will use your ship to travel to your homeworld. It will use your biomass to make more of itself, and then it will consume your entire planet. We have seen it happen. Captain Sue stared at Min. He saw no madness in her eyes. He saw only a fierce, determined intelligence. He saw a look he had not seen in anyone for a very long time. The look of a fighter? Why? Sue asked her, his voice low and serious. Why would you take such a risk? Min held his gaze. Because you are all looking at this the same way. You see a perfect enemy. We see a puzzle. And on Earth we have a long, long history of solving deadly puzzles. She paused. Our theory is simple. What if the lock is different? Hana shook her head. The GC1 sequence is universal. To you, Min said. But not to us. For a moment no one spoke. The idea was so simple, so obvious that it had never occurred to them. They had never met a people who were not part of their galactic family. They had never met a people who were truly biologically alien. Sue made a decision. It was the most dangerous decision he had ever made. He looked at Hana. Prepare a containment capsule. A small live sample for the humans. Hana looked at him, her face full of fear and protest. Captain, that is an order, Sue said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He turned back to Min and Jin. You will take the sample to your ship. You will run your tests. If there is any breach, any sign of containment failure, I will not hesitate to vaporize the UNSS Endurance. Do you understand the terms? Min nodded. Her face was serious, but her eyes were alight with a grim purpose. We understand, Captain, she said. Thank you for the chance. As Min and Jin left the room to return to their ship, Hana turned to Sue, her hands trembling. What have you done, Sue? You may have just killed an entire world. Captain Sue looked back at the main screen, which now showed the UNSS Endurance waiting beside them. It looked small and fragile against the darkness of space. Or, he said quietly, I may have just given the galaxy its first and only chance. The heavy door to the laboratory sealed with a deep hiss. The sound of metal locking into place was final. On one side of the thick glass window was the clean, bright corridor of the UNSS Endurance. On the other side were Min and Jin, dressed in bulky protective suits. The air inside was filtered and recirculated. The only way out was through a chemical shower that would burn away any microscopic contaminant. In the center of the room, on a steel table, sat the container from the Daedalus. It was a small, sleek cylinder made of a shimmering metal. A soft blue light on its top pulsed slowly, indicating it was secure. Jin's voice came through the comms, clear inside Min's helmet. Pressure is stable. Biofilters are green. We are ready to proceed. Min took a slow breath. The air in her suit tasted of plastic and recycled oxygen. She approached the container. With a gloved hand, she entered a code into a keypad on its side. The blue light turned yellow. There was a soft click. The top of the cylinder slid open without a sound. Inside, resting on a field of energy, was a small, shimmering gray globule. It was no bigger than her thumb. It pulsed slowly, rhythmically, like a tiny, sleeping heart. It looked almost beautiful. This was the thing that had killed worlds. Initiating scan, Min said. Her fingers danced over a control panel on her arm. A thin blue beam of light swept over the blight sample. Data began to stream across a screen on the wall. Genetic sequences, protein structures, energy signatures. It was incredibly complex. The code was changing even as they watched it, rewriting itself in tiny, meaningless ways. It was practicing. It's as they said, Jin observed, watching the data from his station. A perfect learning machine on a microscopic level. It's waiting for a host. Then let's not keep it waiting, Min replied. Her voice was calm, but her heart was beating fast. She used a robotic arm to carefully take the blight sample and place it inside a transparent isolation box. Then she guided another arm that held a small, thin slice of tissue. It was her own, grown from a few of her skin cells for this purpose. She placed the living human tissue into the box, a few inches from the blight. For a moment, nothing happened. The gray globule sat there pulsing. The human tissue, pink and healthy, lay still. Then the blight moved. It was not a slow creep. It was a lunge. A pseudopod, a temporary leg, shot out from the main mass and touched the edge of the human tissue. The effect was instantaneous. The blight seemed to vibrate with a terrible energy. It flowed over the tissue like water, engulfing it completely. On the data screen, the readings went wild. The blight was doing what it always did. It was trying to read the genetic code of the cells. It was looking for the GC1 protein sequence, the universal key, but it wasn't finding it. The frantic activity on the data screen began to change. The confident, aggressive signals of the blight started to become confused. Jagged, erratic spikes appeared. Inside the isolation box, the gray goo covering the human tissue began to bubble and quiver. It was not converting the tissue. Instead, the blight itself was changing. A small hard lump of a strange yellowish material pushed out from its surface. Then a few strands of something that looked like dark hair. A patch of the goo turned hard and white like a flake of dry skin. What is it doing? Jin asked, his voice full of wonder and horror. It's trying to follow the instructions it's reading, Min said, her eyes glued to the screen. But our DNA isn't a simple, clean manual. It's a messy, chaotic library, and most of the books are written in dead languages. The blight was a master programmer, but it had been given a hard drive full of corrupted files, ancient viruses, and defensive junk code accumulated over millions of years of evolution. It was trying to build a human, but it was using broken blueprints. It was creating useless, non-functional parts. Then something else happened. The human tissue, what was left of it, was not just lying there passively. Its cells were damaged, but they were not conquered. They were fighting back, Specialized cells, which had been dormant, now identified the confused, misfiring blight as a foreign invader. They began to attack. On the screen, Jin saw the signals. Min, look. The T-cells. The inflammatory response. Your immune system. It's engaging. It was a tiny, microscopic war. The human immune cells, designed to fight off thousands of different earthly pathogens, swarmed the disoriented blight. They attached to it. They released chemicals to break it apart. The blight, which had never faced an enemy that fought back from the inside, had no defense for this. It was programmed to rewrite code, not to fight a battle. The gray mass started to break apart. It stopped pulsing. It became still and dark, like a lump of ash. A few minutes later, it was over. The human immune cells had destroyed the invader. The blight was inert, dead. The laboratory was utterly silent. Min and Jin just stared at the isolation box. The tiny piece of human tissue was partly consumed, but around it was the shattered, neutralized remains of the galaxy's most perfect predator. Jin was the first to speak. It doesn't know how to read us. Our biology is too chaotic. Our immune system is too aggressive. Min finally let out the breath she had been holding. A slow, fierce smile spread across her face inside her helmet. It's not that it can't read us, Jin. It's that it's reading too much. It's reading the history of every plague, every virus, every infection that ever tried to kill us. And that history is terrifying. Back on the bridge of the Daedalus, Captain Sue and Hana were waiting. They had seen no explosion, no emergency signal from the human ship. It had been hours. The tension was thick. Perhaps it consumed them quickly. A clean death, Hana said, though she did not sound like she believed it. Just then, the communication panel chimed. It was a request for a video channel from the Endurance. Sue accepted it immediately. Min's face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, but her eyes were blazing with a triumphant light. She was still in her protective suit, her helmet off. Captain Sue, Dr. Hana, she said. We have results. The sample? Hana asked urgently. Is it contained? The sample is neutralized, Min said. It's dead. A stunned silence filled the bridge of the Daedalus. Hana's mouth fell open. Sue leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of his chair. Explain, he commanded. Your people were right. The blight is a key, Min began. But our biology is a different lock. It tried to read our genetic code and it got confused. It found instructions for things that have been inside us for millions of years. Ancient battles fought and won by our ancestors. It tried to follow those instructions and it fell apart. Then my body's natural defenses attacked and finished the job. Hana shook her head, unable to process it. That's impossible. The blight adapts. It learns. It can't learn if the lesson doesn't make sense, Jin's voice said as he appeared on the screen next to Min. Imagine trying to have a conversation with someone who only speaks in the forgotten languages of long-dead enemies. That's what the blight faced inside that box. It wasn't a fight. It was a system crash. Captain Sue stood up. His mind, which had been resigned to a slow galactic death, was now racing. Are you saying you are immune? Not just immune, Captain, Min said, her voice firm. We are lethal to it. Our very biology is a weapon the blight cannot comprehend. The weight of her words settled over the two crews. The humans looked determined. The crew of the Daedalus looked as if they were witnessing a miracle. This changes everything, Sue whispered. It does, Min agreed, but we have a problem. This only works inside a human body. We can't save a planet by having one person stand in the middle of it. We need to find a way to scale this up, to turn our immune response into something we can deploy. Hana, the scientist, was already thinking. The blight is a hive mind. It communicates through chemical and energy signals. If it encounters a threat it cannot process, that confusion could spread. Exactly, Jin said. We need to replicate the danger signal of a human immune system. If we can create an aerosol, a mist that carries that signal, and release it over a blight-infected area, the entire local blight mass might receive the signal that it's under attack by something it cannot understand. Min finished. It might just shut down. Captain Sue looked from Min's determined face to Hana's newly hopeful one. For the first time in years, a real concrete plan was forming. A plan that was not about running or hiding, but about fighting back. What do you need from us? Sue asked, his voice strong and clear. Access to your medical synthesizers, Min said, and your data on planetary dispersal systems. And one more thing. What is it? We need a test subject. A world that is freshly infected. Somewhere the blight is still active but hasn't fully consumed everything yet. Sue nodded. He turned to his navigation officer. Pull up the galactic map. Find me a candidate. Somewhere the blight has recently landed. The officer worked quickly. Captain, the world Xylos, it was infected 2 cycles ago. Scans show approximately 30% biomass conversion. The native life is still fighting. Sue looked back at the screen at the 2 humans who had come from nowhere and changed everything. Then set a course for Xylos. He ordered. We have a weapon to build. The journey to the world called Xylos was a quiet one, filled with a new kind of work. On the Daedalus, the mood had shifted from despair to a tense, fragile hope. It was a strange feeling for the crew. They had forgotten what it was like to have a goal other than survival. Min and Jin spent most of their time in the Daedalus's advanced medical lab. Hana worked with them. The sleek alien technology was different from what they were used to on the Endurance, but the principles of science were the same. They were trying to bottle lightning. The problem was simple to say, but hard to do. They needed to copy the signal of a human immune system. They needed to take the chemical warning cries that Min's cells had used when they fought the blight and turn them into a weapon. They started with more of Min's blood. They exposed her white blood cells to tiny dead fragments of the blight. They watched carefully as the cells reacted. They released a storm of tiny proteins and chemicals, cytokines, histamines, interferons. These were the danger signals. This was the chemical language that said, "Attack here." These are the signals that confused the blight, Jin said, pointing to the complex formulas on the screen. It's not one signal. It's a chorus, a chaotic, screaming chorus. Hana looked at the data, her brow furrowed. The blight hive mind communicates in a clean, efficient language. This is noise. It is panic. That's the point, Min said, her eyes tired but focused. We need to make the planetary blight mass have a panic attack. They worked for long hours. They used the ship's synthesizers to create a mist filled with these human danger chemicals. It was a harmless aerosol to any normal life form. It was like the smell of smoke without the fire. But to the blight, they hoped it would be the smell of a predator it could not see or understand. They tested the mist on small blight samples. The effect was the same each time. The blight would react to the chemical signals. It would stop its steady consumption and start to shiver. It would try to adapt, to build a defense, but the signals were too chaotic. It was like trying to build a wall against a loud sound. The blight would expend all its energy, writhe violently, and then fall still. It was not being killed by a poison. It was dying of confusion. They called the mist canary dust. It was a name from old Earth, from when miners would bring canaries into coal mines. If the bird died, the air was bad. Their mist was the canary, and it was singing a song of death for the blight. Finally, they stood in the lab, looking at a small canister of the finished product. It looked like nothing. A simple metal container. It is ready, Hana said, her voice soft with awe. Captain Sue's voice came over the ship's comms. We are approaching Xylos, you should see this. They went to the bridge. The planet Xylos filled the main viewer. It was a world of vast purple forests and silver seas. But the blight was there. Ugly gray scars crawled across the beautiful surface. From space, they could see the gray areas slowly, relentlessly expanding. It has taken the smaller continent, Sue said, pointing. It is now spreading across the main landmass. We have little time. Where should we release the canary dust? Min asked. Hana studied the scans. There, that valley. The blight mass is thick there, and it is connected to the main network. If our theory is correct, the confusion will spread from that point through the entire hive mind on the planet. The plan was simple. A small, fast ship from the Daedalus would fly down into the atmosphere. It would release the canary dust over the target valley. Then they would watch. And wait, Min and Jin insisted on going. It's our theory. We should be there, Min said. Sue agreed. He knew this was a moment in history. He would not deny them. The small ship, called a shuttle, detached from the Daedalus and flew towards Xylos. The pilot was a quiet man named Lee. Min and Jin sat in the back, the canister of canary dust secured between them. The ride down was bumpy. They entered the atmosphere, and the sky turned from black to a pale lavender. Below them, the damage was clearer. The purple forests were being swallowed by the creeping gray goo. It was like watching a painting being erased. They reached the target valley. It was a terrible sight. The ground was gone, replaced by a pulsating gray carpet. Strange, twisted shapes rose from it, the half-formed remains of trees and animals that the blight had tried and failed to copy perfectly. The air was silent. There were no bird sounds, no insect hum, just the low, wet sound of the blight moving. "This is the place," and Lee said, his voice tense. "Open the dispersal hatch," Jin instructed. A bay door opened underneath the shuttle. Min activated the canister. With a low hiss, the canary dust began to spray out, forming a fine, invisible mist that settled over the gray landscape below. They flew back and forth, covering the entire valley in the mist. Nothing happened at first. The blight continued its slow, hungry pulse. "Maybe it didn't work," Lee said, a note of despair in his voice. "Give it time," Min said, but she felt a knot of fear in her own stomach. Then, they saw it. A patch of blight in the center of the valley suddenly stopped pulsing. It started to vibrate. The vibration spread outwards in a wave like a ripple on a pond. Where the ripple passed, the blight began to change. It was not the calm, purposeful change of adaptation. This was violent and chaotic. The gray goo began to bubble and heave. It threw up strange, useless structures, lumps of hard material, patches of fuzz, sharp spikes of bone-like matter. It was trying every possible defense at once and succeeding at none. The smooth, unified hive mind was breaking down into a billion individual panicking parts. Then the gray color started to fade. It turned a pale, sickly brown. The movement slowed. The heaving mass began to crack and crumble. It was like watching a desert of mud dry up under a hot sun. From their orbit, the crew of the Daedalus watched the sensor data in stunned silence. "The energy signatures from the blight mass in the valley are fading," an officer reported, his voice shaking. It's becoming inert." On the shuttle, Min, Jin, and Lee watched the same thing happen with their own eyes. The Valley of Gray was turning into a valley of dust. The blight was dying. Not from a bomb or a laser, but from an idea it could not understand. "It's working," Jin whispered. "The signal is spreading, look." Beyond the valley, the edges of the blight infection on the main continent were also starting to slow down. The creeping gray tide was stopping. The hive mind was receiving the message from the valley. Danger. Incomprehensible threat. System failure. The message was spreading across the entire planet. Lee turned the shuttle around and flew back towards the Daedalus. No one spoke on the way back. There were no words for what they had just seen. When they landed back in the ship's hangar, the crew was waiting for them. There was no cheering. It was too big for that. It was a deep, profound silence. Captain Sue walked up to Min and Jin as they stepped off the shuttle. He looked at their tired, dusty faces. He saw the empty canister in Min's hand. He did not say thank you. The word was too small. Instead, he looked at them and then at the image of Xylos on the main viewer, where the gray scars were slowly, miraculously, turning brown and crumbling away. He simply said, "It is done." For the first time in the memory of any living being in the galactic commons, the blight had been defeated. Not contained. Not escaped from. Defeated. And the weapon had not been a gun or a shield. The weapon had been a story. The long, bloody, and resilient story of life on Earth, written in the language of its own immune system. A story the blight could not read and could not survive. The news from Xylos did not just travel. It exploded. It moved through the galactic commons faster than any ship could fly. It was a shockwave of hope. The message was simple and impossible. The blight had been stopped. On the Daedalus, the quiet relief did not last long. The communication channels were flooded. Every surviving world, every fleeing ship, every desperate leader was calling. They all asked the same question. Is it true? Captain Sue and his crew became the center of the galaxy's attention. He spent the next hours speaking to councils and commanders. He showed them the data from Xylos. He showed them the before and after scans. The gray, pulsing infection was now a vast, brown, dead patch. The native purple forests were not growing back yet, but the blight was gone. The planet was silent, but it was no longer dying. The leaders on the view screen were hard for Min to look at. Some were insect-like with large, compound eyes. Others were tall and slender, with skin like polished stone. They all shared the same expression, a desperate, burning hope. You have a cure? One of them asked. Its voice a series of clicks that the translator turned into speech. We have a counter-agent, Sue corrected carefully. He gestured for Min to step forward. This is Min. Her people from Earth provided the solution. All those alien eyes turned to Min. The weight of their gaze was immense. She felt the responsibility settle on her shoulders like a physical thing. Your method, another leader said, a being wrapped in fine robes. Can it be replicated? Can you save my world? We have only days left. Min took a deep breath. The counteragent, which we call canary dust, is based on human biology. We can make more, but we cannot make an infinite amount, and we cannot reach everyone at once. A chaotic argument broke out among the leaders. Every one of them pleaded for their own people first. They argued about whose world was most important, whose population was largest, who had the best chance of survival. It was the sound of a galaxy tearing itself apart in its struggle to live. Captain Su silenced them with a sharp command. This is not a debate. The decision is not ours to make. He turned to Min and Jin. You brought this weapon. You must decide how it is used. Min felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She was a scientist. She was not a general. She was not a queen who decided the fate of worlds. She looked at Jin. His face was pale, but he gave her a small, steady nod. They had to do this together. She turned back to the view screen to the faces of 1,000 doomed species. We will help, Min said, her voice firm. But we need a system. We will go to the worlds where the blight has most recently arrived. We will save the ones we can reach the fastest. This will stop the blight from growing stronger. Your ships can evacuate people from the more infected worlds and bring them to the ones we have cleared. It was a triage, a brutal medical decision made on a galactic scale. It was the only way. One of the leaders, a creature with gentle, deer-like eyes, bowed its head. We accept your wisdom, human. Please come to our world next. The blight landed just yesterday. Su looked at his navigation officer. Plot a course for Kithri. Maximum speed. The next days became a blur. The Daedalus and the Endurance became a factory and a warship combined. They traveled from world to world. A planet of floating cities and a gas giant. A world of deep underground oceans. A desert moon. At each one, the process was the same. They would fly low over the infection zone. They would release the canary dust, and they would watch the miracle happen. The blight would react, convulse, and die. It never learned. It never adapted. The simple, chaotic signal of the human immune system was a weapon it could never defend against. It was a lock it could not pick. Min and Jin worked until they could barely stand. They supervised the production of the canary dust. They analyzed each new blight strain, though it made no difference. The result was always the same. On the fifth world, something different happened. They were over a planet of vast crystalline forests. The blight was spreading across the plains below. They released the dust. The gray goo began its usual death throes, bubbling and crumbling into dust, but then, a large piece of the blight mass, instead of dying quietly, suddenly shot a spike of hardened material high into the air. It was aimed directly at their shuttle. Evasive action, Lee yelled, pulling hard on the controls. The spike missed the shuttle by inches. It was not an attack of purpose. It was a spasm, a final violent reflex. But it was dangerous. They are learning to fight back? Jin asked, alarmed. Min studied the data. No, look at the composition of that spike. It's pure calcium. It's not a weapon. It's a bone. The blight is so confused it's just throwing random parts of genetic code at us. It's not learning. It's having a seizure. The incident was a sharp reminder. The blight was a dangerous animal in its death throes. They could not be careless. They returned to the Daedalus. Min was exhausted. She went to the observation deck to be alone for a moment. She looked out at the stars. So many stars, so many worlds. The scale of it was overwhelming. Hana found her there. The two women stood in silence for a while, watching the universe turn. I have spent my life watching worlds die, Hana said quietly. I thought I would do so until my own world was gone. You have given us a future, Min shook her head. It's not me. It's just what we are. We didn't choose it, but you chose to come, Hana said. You chose to help. That is what your people brought to the galaxy. Not just a weapon, but the will to use it for others. The comm system chimed. It was Captain Su. Min, Jin, please come to the bridge. They arrived to find the crew looking at a new message. It was from the Galactic Central Council. The leader of the council, an ancient being whose species had been among the first to fall, appeared on the screen. Captain Su. Humans of Earth, the leader said. its voice slow and heavy with emotion. The Blight is in retreat on 12 worlds. The tide has turned. The Galactic Commons owes you a debt that can never be repaid. We are naming this the Great Cleansing. From this day forward, Earth will be remembered as a guardian world. The message ended. The bridge was silent. Min did not feel like a guardian. She felt tired. She thought of the worlds they had saved. But she also thought of the worlds they had not reached in time. The ones that were already gone. The weight of it was still there. But as she looked around at the crew of the Daedalus, she saw their faces. They were not weighed down anymore. They stood taller. They had purpose. They had a future. The war was not over. There were still countless Blight-infected worlds to cleanse. It would take years. But for the first time, they knew they would win. The Blight had conquered 1,000 worlds. It had met an immune system it could not break. And now that immune system was spreading through the galaxy, carried on ships bringing not just life but the fierce, stubborn will to protect it. A year passed. The change in the galaxy was slow, but it was deep like a healing wound. The Great Cleansing continued. Ships from Earth now worked alongside ships from a dozen other worlds. They were called the Cleaners. Their mission was simple: find the Blight and wipe it out. Min stood on the bridge of a new ship. It was not the Daedalus and it was not the Endurance. It was a joint vessel, built with human and galactic technology. Its name was the Remembrance. Captain Sue was still in command. Hana was still the chief doctor. But the crew was a mix of many species. They had become a family. They were in orbit around a world that had no name, only a number. It was one of the first worlds the Blight had consumed. For years it had been a dead gray ball, silent and pulsing. Now it was just a dead brown ball. The Blight was gone, starved into dust by the canary dust they had released months before. Scanning the surface, an officer said. This officer was not human. He was a Kithrian with long, sensitive fingers that danced over the controls. No signs of Blight activity. Biomass is inert. The atmosphere is stable but thin. The planet is empty. Begin Phase 2, Sue ordered. From the belly of the Remembrance, a different kind of ship launched. It was a seeding ship, designed by human ecologists and galactic engineers. It flew low over the barren continents, releasing not poison but life. Tiny hardy spores of lichen and algae, genetically modified bacteria designed to break down the Blight dust and enrich the soil. It was the first small step to bringing a world back to life. It would take centuries, maybe millennia, but it was a start. Later in the mess hall, Min sat with Jin and Hana. The hall was a strange and wonderful place. Humans ate their packaged meals alongside Kithrians sipping nutrient fluids and the rock-like Telans who absorbed minerals through their hands. The air was filled with the hum of different languages and the translators. It is strange, Hana said, watching a young human engineer laugh with a Kithrian technician. For so long, our unity was our weakness. The Blight used it against us. Now our unity with you is our strength. It's a different kind of unity, Jin said. We're not the same. Our biology is different. Our thoughts are different. But we chose to work together. That's the difference. Min nodded. She looked at her hands. They were the same hands that had held the first Blight sample. They had built the first canary dust. They had helped to change the galaxy. But she was still just herself. A scientist from Earth. A call came in for her. It was a high-priority channel from Earth. She took it in a quiet room. The face on the screen was the head of the United Earth Space Command. He was an older man with a kind but serious face. Dr. Min, he said, I have new orders for you. Your work on the Remembrance is nearly complete. We want you to come home. Min was surprised. Home? Yes, the galaxy is safe. The cleaner fleets are running themselves. We need you here. You are a hero. There is a new research institute being built. Named after you. You could lead it. Teach the next generation. It was a great honor. It was everything a scientist could want. A quiet life, respect, safety. She thought about it. She thought about Earth, green and blue and safe. She thought about a clean lab and students. Then she thought about the dead brown world outside her window. She thought about the seeding ships. She thought about the hope in the eyes of the Kithrians when their world was saved. She thought about the quiet friendship she had with Hana and the steady support from Jin. She thought about Captain Sue, who had become like a father to her. I'm sorry. Sir, Min said, her voice clear and certain, but my work is not done. The Blight is gone, but these worlds, they are empty. They need to be healed. That is the next great project. And this is my home now, out here. The man on the screen looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled. It was a proud smile. I thought you might say that. The orders are yours to refuse. The Remembrance is your ship for as long as you wish. Thank you, sir. When the call ended, Min went to find Captain Sue. He was on the observation deck, looking down at the world they were bringing back to life. I just spoke with Earth Command, Min said, standing beside him. They wanted me to come home. Sue didn't look at her. And will you? No. A small smile touched Sue's lips. Good. They stood in a comfortable silence. The brown planet turned slowly below them. It was not beautiful yet, but it was full of potential. The Blight thought it was the ultimate life form, Sue said after a while. It was wrong. It was just a consumer, a taker. It could only make more of itself. He turned to Min. You humans, you are different. You don't just consume. You build. You repair. You fight for things that are not your own. You brought us a weapon, but you stayed to help us plant gardens. That is a much more powerful thing. Min looked out at the stars. There were so many worlds to heal. So many stories yet to be written. The Blight had been a dark chapter, but it was over. The Remembrance continued its slow, steady orbit. It was no longer a warship. It was a seed of hope, carrying a crew of many species, led by the people from the world with the fierce immune system. They were the gardeners of the galaxy, and their work had just begun.